Hello, hello, is there anybody there? It seems I'm all alone again, does anybody care? This planet's empty, I see no signs of life. Please don't tell me that the human race did not survive. There are no people in the future. There are no people. There are no people in the future. No people at all. There are no people in the future. Where did all my people go? There are no people in the future. Let me try my people call. Where are all my people? Where are all my people? I guess I'll fly away now.
Hey, everybody. Welcome. Yes. Let me get this level up here. There we go. Welcome. Yes. Oh my gosh. Can you believe it? It is Friday, May 17th, 2024. Welcome to Raging Chicken's Friday Politics Roundup. This is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. So getting some music there? Yeah, a little bit. Oh, God. Each week we break down the good, the bad, and the ugly in state and national politics. You can help support this show, become a patron for as little as $5 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/rcpress. You can also help out the show by heading over to our YouTube channel if you're not there already. Smash that subscribe button, like the stream for this show, and hit that notification bell so you know every time that we go live. And if you're one of our awesome podcast listeners, make sure to leave us a 5-star review on whatever platform you listen on. Leave a comment to let folks know why you like the show. Little things like this help other people find the show. Well, on today's program, we got a few things to talk about, as well as the welcome back. Biden halts some aid to Israel and then clears billions in arms as the Netanyahu government continues its assault on Rafa amidst calls for some right-wing Israelis to permanently settle the Gaza Strip. Yeah, couldn't have seen that coming. Meanwhile, is it time to start getting concerned that Trump is coming out ahead in some of these polls? Biden's people said they're not worried. New York Times has got a piece on that. And the University of California union, representing more than 48,000 academic workers, calls for a strike authorization vote over the university's attacks on Gaza encampments and protests. Could this signal another step forward? Unchaining? Another step toward unchaining American unions from decades of low-bar action? And it could be. And Trump is encouraging fossil fuel companies to dump about $1 billion into getting him elected, promising end to all those pesky climate regulations. And of course, that comes on the heels of scientists warning that we are on track to blow past 1.5 degrees of warming and toward a, quote, semi-dystopian future. What can we do all about this? Well, for one thing, it's a small thing, but it's a thing. Right, we could get your tickets to Beacon Fest. Yeah, that's right. Beacon Fest is going to be pretty awesome. On June 1st, the Bucks County Beacon is having an evening of awesome music down at the Snipes Farm in Morrisville, Pennsylvania. Emily Drinker from Philly is headlining it, and she headlines an outstanding lineup. Great Barn Brewery is going to be there on hand to serve up the food and drinks. You can get all the details at buckscountybeacon.com/beaconfest. It is Beacon Fest, everyone. It's like a couple of weeks away. Pretty cool. And for more PA progressive talk, tune to the Rick Smith Show's live stream at 9 p.m. Eastern on his YouTube channel, Twitter, or Facebook, and subscribe to his podcast wherever you get your podcast. Go to thericksmithshow.com for the latest across all his platforms. And you got to check out the Sisters of the Night Caucus podcast. Amazing PA women stirring the political cauldron behind this podcast. Rock the house. And you know where the bodies are buried. Make sure to follow them on Twitter at The Night Caucus. That's at The Night Caucus on Twitter. Subscribe to their podcast on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, we got The Signal. The Signal is a podcast from the Bucks County Beacon. The Signal is hosted by the Beacon's editor-in-chief, Cyril Michaleko, and produced by yours truly. Twice a month, The Signal will shine a light on right-wing extremist currents streaming through Bucks County and beyond. Cyril invites guests who can provide insight, analysis, and organizing solutions so that we can steer the community toward calmer, saner, progressive routes. Check them out at the buckscountybeacon.podbean.com for The Signal. Indeed. And attention all you gamers out there, The Game-In is a Quakertown-based black family-owned gaming store. They're friends of the show. They got everything from retro N64s, the latest consoles, video games for all platforms, collectibles, action figures, Funko Pops, walls of Funko Pops. And look, good grades get your kids discounts too. Got to check it out. We're almost at the end of the school year. Pretty awesome. Got a question about a game, look for something hard to get, they've got you covered. Check them out on their Facebook page and follow them on Twitter at @thegamein. That's @thegamein.com. Or @thegamein. @thegamein. I don't know what I'm saying. Shoot a message or drop them an email at thegameinpa@gmail.com. See, I'm a little out of practice here, folks. And if you find yourself in the Kutztown area, you got to check out the Heart and Hearth Deli and Smokehouse, located at 466 West Main, kitty corner from the Kutztown University campus. The Heart and Hearth is an American bistro featuring barbecue and French-inspired fare, all with locally sourced and organic ingredients. You got to check them out. Heart and Hearth Deli and Smokehouse. Oof, something else. Special shout out goes to Jonathan Mann, who wrote our intro song, There Are No People in the Future. You can check out all of his great stuff on his YouTube page and follow him on Twitter at @SongADayMan. That's @SongADayMan on Twitter. Or X. Look, everybody, if we want progressive future, we need progressive media. Support Pull No Punches, homegrown progressive media today. Become a patron of Raging Chicken for as little as $5 a month. Go to patreon.com/rcpress. We're here for the fight, but we need you. Become a patron for the price of a good beer once a month. Help keep the media in the movement in the media. Become a patron for as little as $5 a month by go to patreon.com/rcpress today. Well, everybody, it has been a minute, and as you may have already heard in my voice right now, I'm still not kind of feeling 100%, but I just couldn't let another week go by. I mean, it's been way too long. It's been a series. It's like, a series of unfortunate events, if you will. If you recall, God, about a month ago now, my computer went haywire. And so I had to get it fixed, and it took a little bit because look at this. I didn't even need to kind of do my little thing. I don't even know where it is. Hold on. This is what happens when you're kind of like, get out of whack a little bit. This is what happens. You just forget how to do stuff. It's like I'm forgetting to put the chat up in the little box over here, and all that kind of stuff. So there we go. Now it's all set. I know for your podcast listeners out there, you're like, what the heck are you talking about? But yeah, so it's been a little rocky road there. So I had my computer kind of went down. It's just weird stuff going on with my sound card. There was, it was the sound card, and it was something that was locking up my entire system when I was trying to do any kind of audio or streaming stuff. So I had to take my, I had to piecework a couple of the signals, because like I said, I kind of do the editing for that podcast of the signal of Bucks County Beacon, and I had to kind of take that and try to do that on a couple different computers, trying to figure out how to do that kind of editing, and I had to take my computer to the shop because I just couldn't get it to work. And so he went ahead, and so I brought it into the shop, got fixed, but it's still not quite right. I don't know what the deal is. So I had a couple updates. This is way too much information already, right? I had a couple updates about for my sound card, and a couple updates came through. Like I have a NVIDIA. NVIDIA is also there for they have this GeoForce experience and stuff. A couple of updates came to that. I don't know if that's what the deal is, but even now when I'm editing my sound again, when I'm using Audacity, that's the program I generally use in order to do this. When I'm using that program, it doesn't sound right. But when I put out the MP3, right, or when I put out the final version and I kind of listen on another device, it's fine. So I don't know. So I'm actually doing a lot of like sound editing, looking at the how the sound is visually displayed, because it's not coming through my stuff right. So whatever. I mean, so that happened, and of course that happened right ahead of the end of my semester. I got a little bit sick, right? And but then seemed to get better from that. And then I had my brother's wedding came up, and so I had to go up to Utica for that wedding. We came back, my son got sick, my wife got sick, and I got sick. So we picked up something, not COVID, but something that is just, man, it is hanging on. I mean, it's been like almost 2 weeks now. So, and that's happened at the same time that it's the end of my semester. All my grading comes in, and we're moving our offices from one building to another one, so you have to pack up all our stuff. So it's been just a little kind of chaotic sometimes. So I've like, whatever. So, each time it's like, okay, I'm going to go back and do kind of a welcome back show. And then, it doesn't happen because, one thing or another. Not to mention the fact that, like, every other day it seems that, there's something going on for my kids. End of the school stuff thing again, so it's been that kind of chaos. So I appreciate everybody. I appreciate the emails and the messages from folks. Make sure everything's okay. Ask if there's going to be a show. It's been good, and I really appreciate your patience, because it's just whatever. I got to one point, seriously, to be honest with you, I got to one point I'm just like, forget it. I just can't, I can't get it all to work. And so I'm just, forget it. Forget everything. Like, I was so bummed out about all this stuff, but what are you gonna do? But here I'm back. Like I said, not feeling 100% great, but I thought I'd come back on, at least kind of touch base with everybody and get the ball rolling again, because it's big time. Oh, yeah, the other thing that came up in the midst of all this, right? Of course, I was just thinking, I'm missing something. Oh yeah, primary elections came in, right? All sorts of, there's so much going on. I just can't even begin to capture it all. So instead of trying to capture it all, just trying to looking at a few things that's going on right now. I mean, some of the things, I guess as we're kind of moving into the kind of election season proper. Now I know that everything kind of dies down a bit over the summer. And, as there's been a lot of coverage of, Trump is on trial for his, using campaign funds to try to squash the Stormy Daniels story, to prevent that from negatively impacting his campaign. And of course, that was done illegally. But, we'll see what happens in that. I have, and like I said before, I think on the last show, I haven't been following the stuff like super, super tight. I mean, I listen to, reports on it and stuff and read a little bit about it, but, I don't think that anything is a foregone conclusion, right? And I think that there's a lot of what I'm hearing from, kind of say the mainstream Democrats, right? In particularly, as it's voiced through, say, MSNBC or, some of the official channels, that I think they see these court cases as having a lot more negative impact on Trump's campaign than they actually do. Now I could be totally wrong about this, but it seems to me that this whole, crying victimhood of, saying that everything is rigged, that the Democrats are running this, that is political persecution, that plays into his whole narrative, right? I mean, that is the side of demagoguery, right? That is, there's a long history. I mean, if you remember, we had Patricia Roberts Miller on this show, kind of last year. She's got this great book called Demagoguery and Democracy. And, we talked a lot about, what happens, right? Or what are the kind of characteristics of demagoguery? And, she's very careful in her book, right? And says it multiple times that, Trump didn't create, like, he didn't come in and just brainwash everybody, right? You don't have somebody like that rise to power without having a culture of demagoguery, right? Of this kind of, of this us versus them, kind of deep seated. And, again, this has been a recurrent theme in our country's history, right? I think it happens when you have a country that is kind of founded on kind of white supremacy and patriarchy and the kind of the genocide of indigenous peoples. There's this built-in folks that say, yes, we're just going to take it is ours and not theirs, right? And meaning ours, meaning white people's and not everybody else's. So I think there's a long history of that in this country. And then you add into that, Anand Giridharadas' book, The Persuaders. It's a book that I read in my class this semester with my students. That book is, really digs deeply into this whole, say call out culture, right? Where it's all about, like demonizing opposition, right? About casting them all into this frame of good and evil, and not, and really policing the boundaries of your own folks. Like, and there's at one point in the book, I don't remember if it's Alicia Garza that he interviews at one point, or if that's her, or if that is somebody else, or Saussure maybe, I don't know. But at one point there, he interviews a bunch of folks that are actually kind of invested in actually changing minds and persuasion, right? And some people that some of the folks I just said, you're going to recognize, right? They're very, they're not kind of people think, oh, we should all just get along. No, they're all for pushing for expansion of democracy, deepening of justice, all that other kind of stuff. And, one of the things that, they say is like, there's a way which we spend too much time in trying to convince like the people who agree with us 90% of the time to be 100%, right? We spend this time to say, okay, no, you're not there. You're not 100%. So therefore we're going to critique you, right? And just kind of going to battle with people that you're basically kind of like working with. That's on the one side, and then on the other side, it's kind of to completely say demonize everyone else, right? So kind of the middle and over, and that's the kind of context that Trump played right into. I mean, that's his whole life, right? So when he's out in front of the court, which, I mean, I think to your ears and my ears probably, and it sounds like the guy's the biggest baby. He's a little big whiners out there, just complaining, I can't believe they can't talk. He's like not even being truthful. He just wants to be able to demonize. He wants to be able to kind of personally go after an attack, and kind of like to fan the flames of violence, right? And then meanwhile you got that guy down in I always forget that guy's name, I can't stand him, the guy down in Florida, right? The Trump acolyte down in Florida, Matt, whatever his name is, the little like creepy predator guy. He basically just pulled out, went down and to that support of Trump outside the trial, and basically used, or a line from that Trump used when it came to the ahead of the insurrection, right? He basically, what he told the Proud Boys to stand by and stand back, right? And then you have Matt Gaetz, his name, right? Matt Gaetz going out to, yep, we're standing by and standing back, right? Basically indicating they're ready for violence, right? I mean, this is just crazy shit. So that's all going on, right? That's all going on right now. It's just like slow moving train. And I'll be honest with you, I have zero sense of the depth of that stuff. Like how I don't think what we're going through right now is an analog for what happened in the 2020 election. Like, again, I don't think it's a one-to-one that we can look, oh, is this happening? Is this happening just like it did last time? I really think we're in a situation where we have to, we're going to see new forms come up. And I don't, and I'm, concerned about it, but I'm also, well, where are all the people outside the courtroom? I mean, where all this, and, and to some degree, I think some of that has to do with the fact that you have all this, the whole social media environment has just kind of fractured, right? Mainstream media is so far removed, particular cable news is so far removed from actually what's going on, right? They can't even touch it. There's, what you're seeing coverage in the newspapers is really kind of mixed, right? Every paper is mixed. What's going on? And it just seems like this really unsettled period. A perfect example of what's happening, in the Israeli government's war on Palestinians in Gaza, right? And and I put it that way precisely because they're perfectly happy with slaughter of civilians, right? And there was an interview on the BBC, and he was talking to a spokesman for the Israeli government, and it comes out and says, we've killed, I forget what he says, he had a number, like we've killed 14,000 Hamas fighters, right? Something like that. Now, there's all sorts of problems with those numbers, right? Because, there's been reporting that's come out, right? Even reporting from newspapers in Israel and, in the area that, what's happening is that every time they go in and they bomb a building, they count any dead male Palestinian as a Hamas fighter, right? I'm not saying that happens in every single case, but there's been reporting on that that's showing that this is what's going on. So, how do you know, right? What's our assurances that when you give us those numbers with those Hamas fighters, that you're actually talking about Hamas fighters and not civilians, right? We don't know. But then this guy from the BBC, or was it? It might have even been, what's that guy's name? Now that I think about it, I don't know. I wish I had thought about this ahead of time, because I would have read through the comments, but ask them, well, okay, there's a concern, right? Where you're disputing, says to the Israeli spokesperson, you're disputing the fact that that we have this figure that there's over 38,000 civilians killed, right? And he said, yes, it's a blah 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 blah. He said, okay, well, how many civilians have you killed then? And he's like, well, we have no. So wait a minute. He said, wait, I'm not trying to get you here. I'm just saying, precisely the number of how many Hamas fighters you said, and you are the spokesperson of the Israeli government. So, and you're asking us to just trust you when it comes to civilian. This was a guy who's kind of like more on the conservative end of things, who's asking me these questions. And the guy's like, well, what do you mean? He's like, our purpose, we are attempting to. He said, no, I'm not asking you to tell me what you want us to hear. I'm asking you to say, you must know what the number is. And he just would not answer that question. And he said, well, how are we supposed to trust? You're telling us that you're not killing any civilians, that you're keeping on. Well, how do you know that if you don't know the number, right? And how are we going to trust you if you're not willing to tell us what you already know, right? And the guy just would not answer. And it's like, you're starting to see, finally, you're starting to see these fractures in the, taking just verbatim what the Israeli government is saying and basically accepting it. Right? Instead, no, we're starting to actually see what's going on. At each step of the way, Israelis, well, okay, refugees should go to Rafa to be safe. So they go to Rafa, and then what happens? Now they're going to have, Israel decides to, we're going to invade Rafa, and where are you going to go? You go out in this middle of this one area. There's your safe zone, but there's a safe zone with no water, no access to food, no housing. You're talking about 1 million people, right? After you told everybody to go to that place, and you go, it's like one thing after another. This has been consistently this way. And so in the midst of all that, especially with all the encampments at college campuses and the increasing pressure being the Biden administration is facing from people that I think they were hoping was going to stay in the Biden camp, increasing pressure from student protesters and moving, even people within the Democratic Party saying that we've got to stop this. We're just a slaughter of civilians. So Biden finally said, okay, we're not going to ship you these, 20,000 pound bombs, right? These big giant bombs, because they could be used to slaughter indiscriminately. Right. And then Biden got so much pressure back from the Republicans and claiming that he's like, he's with Hamas now. Right. Because Apparently that's the line. All you got to do is you might have a disagreement and then you're with Hamas, right? We're basically saying, look, we have a law in the United States, right? That if U.S. weapons are being given to you, you cannot use them in violation of international law. You cannot use that to violate human rights. You cannot use that to attack civilians. That's U.S. law. And so either you believe in that law or you don't. And Biden's trying to do a wishy-washy thing, right? Okay, yes, we're not going to sell you these weapons. We're not going to I don't know. And even then, like, people are having to find out about it in trickles. Instead of him coming out and say, we will not do this. No, he's got to kind of like let it float out. So people have to uncover it. And then after he gets all this pushback, it turns out, okay, no, we're going ahead with a kind of $1 billion in arms sales anyways, that we're just going to hand over to you guys. And this is the worst kind of policy, worst kind of messaging that you could possibly ask for. Right? You're basically the message that Biden is sending out to people, like, to people who don't want to see genocide, right? The indiscriminate slaughter of civilians. You're saying that our government should not be supporting that. Our tax dollars should not be going to slaughtering of civilians. Right? And so Biden starts to get worried. Somebody in his camp decides, you know what, maybe we need to do something about this. So they do this kind of half-assed policy of banning these 20,000 pound bombs, which, again, okay, good. But that just plows right ahead with what they're doing. I mean, there's no coherency to it whatsoever. There's this, I mentioned Anand Giridharadas' book, The Persuaders, earlier on. And he's got this whole section where he's talking to Anat Shankaracharya, who's a kind of progressive consultant on messaging, who's awesome when it comes to thinking about language and policy and things like this, and is also deeply critical of the way the Democratic Party has done it. But anyways, and it's in there, she's like, look, there's this thing when people start thinking about, what do you do with a policy position, right? Like, if we have a policy position and we have a law that basically says you should not be killing civilians within here, right? You have one side, you have the other side. Yeah, or I don't even want to say that. Let's just say you have two positions, right? Because we have a two-party system, which is part of the problem. But we got these two sides, right? One side believes this, believes A, one side believes B. She says, one side, for example, wants a hamburger, the other side wants pizza. How do you resolve this conflict between these two different things? Because a pizza is not a hamburger, and a hamburger is not a pizza, right? You have to make a choice. Well, what Biden does is kind of what the Democratic Party leadership has done for quite some time, right? They think that there's this kind of moderate position, right? And for them, moderate means like somewhere in between, right? It is a completely principle-less way of resolving a conflict. It is one by saying, like, well, if you want a burger over here, and then over here you want pizza, what we're going to do is we're going to give you a pizza burger. And then everyone's happy, right? Everyone's happy, got a pizza burger. But the person with wanted the pizza didn't want a pizza burger, and the person with the burger didn't want a pizza burger. Right? So you've created like this formal structure for this formula to create this kind of middling in position, and you come up with something that alienates everybody. And worst off, doesn't solve the problem, doesn't even address it. This is a perfect example of that. The other stuff is on Biden's climate policy, right? I mean, on the one hand, right, passes the most significant climate legislation in our country's history, right? Now, that's not saying a whole lot. Don't want to oversell it. That's not saying a whole lot. Why? Well, because we haven't passed any climate legislation really before, right? Biden's initial thing in the Build Back Better bill, that was much more ambitious. But, you know, again, I'm not going to fault Biden for that, because Biden or his administration for that, because it was Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema and an entire Republican Party that sold off to the fossil fuel interest, right? So the fact that they ended up with a significant piece of legislation that actually did real things, even though for some reason is not talking about it at all in any coherent way or any way that is kind of talks about the principles of that piece of legislation. Instead, they use their technocratic mumbo jumbo that just kind of people just turn off to. But anyways, so on the one hand, you pass this piece of legislation, right, to address the climate crisis, right? The very real, concrete, identifiable, verifiable climate crisis. And then, literally with the other hand, you go and you sign off on kind of new oil and gas permits. And now, the U.S. is producing more oil than it ever has. Oil and gas. Make that make sense for me. What happens in the end, what the message is from that kind of move is like, oh, there's not really a climate crisis. We just want to do these things. We just want to be green, which reinforces all the messaging from the right wing. From the denialist to just the kind of, hey, we're going to get ours while we can. I mean, you know, and then there was this, you know, article in the New York Times. When did this come out? Came out at the beginning of the week. And the headline was, Trump leads in 5 key states as young and non-white voters express discontent with Biden. And this was a Times Siena poll, including one with the Philadelphia Inquirer. And they're showing that in Wisconsin, right? Wisconsin is the single one. Biden leads Trump 47 to 45% in this poll. In Pennsylvania, this state, Trump leads Biden 47 to 44%. In Arizona, Trump leads Biden 49 to 42%. In Michigan, Trump leads Biden 49 to 42%. In Georgia, Trump 39% for Biden. Nevada, 50% for Trump, 38% for Biden. That should be concerning, right? Should be concerning. Just looking for this one part. Again, this is my computer is not helping me. So here, I'll read you a little bit from the story. So this is kind of what from the New York Times. So the findings reveal widespread dissatisfaction with the state of the country and serious doubts about Mr. Biden's ability to deliver major improvements to American life. The majority of voters still desire to return to normalcy promised by Mr. Biden in the last campaign, but voters in battleground states remain particularly anxious, unsettled, and itching for change. Nearly 70% of voters say that the country's political and economic systems need major changes, or even to be torn down entirely. Only a sliver of Mr. Biden's supporters, just 13%, believe that the president would bring major changes in a second term, while even many of those who dislike Mr. Trump grudgingly acknowledge that he would shake up an unsatisfying status quo. The sense that Mr. Biden would do little to improve the nation's fortunes has helped erode his standing among young, Black, and Hispanic voters, who usually represent the foundation of any Democratic path to the presidency. The Times Siena polls found that the 3 groups wanted fundamental changes to the American society, not just a return to normalcy, and few believe that Mr. Biden would make even minor changes that would be good for the country. It goes on. But that's really the heart of it right there, right? And what's what's important to see about this, right, is that there's this broader sense of something's really fundamentally wrong and we need a major change. And the dissatisfaction is not with like a specific policy, or it is not necessarily the fact that, yes, we like Trump, right? It's that do not see that the Biden administration has put forward anything other than the status quo. Meanwhile, we have a massive housing crisis in this country. NPR just did a story on this yesterday, right? Or a couple days ago. It was on Marketplace, right? Kind of going through, looking at all the rapidly increasing prices of housing, particular rentals, which is not covered, which I did not realize, which is not covered in the Consumer Price Index, right? So the Consumer Price Index looks at housing costs, but looks at homes, ownership, not rentals. So rental prices keep on going up. That's a huge crisis, especially since people are not moving from their homes, right? And there's not additional stock being built. So there's a housing crisis. We have a climate crisis, which is staring us down, which, again, yes, there's been steady increases in positive things that are going on, but I don't think most people see that, right? I mean, this is the problem with what happens with the Democrats, right? I mean, if you think that everything is a technocratic solution, you can come up with the most brilliant policy that's possible, right? But unless people can see concretely the results of that, right? Unless you have a way of kind of actually really demonstrating that, people are not going to know what's going on, because people don't pay attention to the workings of tax policy other than during tax time. You might have changed the tax policy to kind of give an incentive for this or for that. But if I don't qualify for those certain things, or if I'm not doing that, I don't see it. Does that bring down kind of carbon emissions? Yes. Have we seen an increase of electrical vehicle sales? Yes, although that's slowed a little bit. Right? I mean, those things are happening, but they're not things that are tangible, or it's not being articulated in a way that people can really see it and hold on to it, because it doesn't seem there's any principles behind it. It's all this kind of technocratic fix type of thing. And the things that Biden seems most passionate about are things that are either alienate the base, or as articulated in a very kind of abstract way that, people say, okay, what does that mean? Yeah, we want to save democracy. Yeah, we do. Okay. But, I can tell you this, I teach a class, Rhetoric, Democracy, and Advocacy, okay? Advocacy. And I could tell you this. Americans, students that I've had have helped me see this, that there is a enormous gap between the democracy that you and I, right, want to save, and what people think and know about democracy. Right? Because if you think about what civics teaches, right, or what kind of what some of the ways we learn about democracy in school is we learn about the branches of government. We learn about what this does when elections are, how to register to vote, and all that kind of stuff. All those things are important, but those are just kind of instrumental forms of democracy. The why of democracy, why this is important in our everyday lives, or what the alternatives are, that is really just not embedded in, I certainly in students that I've seen. And that, look, these are good students, right? But how many times they come out of that class and say God, I thought democracy was this thing, and I had no idea there was all this kind of stuff behind it, or I learned so much about this, that, and the other thing, and I don't get to talk about these in my other classes. Blah 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 blah. Right? And I know that it's not just me. So when you say save democracy, I get it. Intellectually, I'm there. But save democracy for what? And what polls like this show is that saving democracy so we can continue doing what we've always done is not cutting it. Like, you gotta fill out the second part of the sentence. The because why part. And it can't just be a negative message. And this is the other part of it, right? This is, like Anat Shenker-Osorio says, you got to have this kind of problem sandwich, right? You got to have the problem. Then you got to paint the beautiful tomorrow, right? And then remind them of the problem, what's standing in the way of us getting into that beautiful tomorrow, right? That's the whole idea. That's the problem sandwich. I was so excited. By the way, I was so excited to read that when she used that as an, because I used this idea about a sandwich in different kinds of contexts, right, before, as a way of trying to articulate how you set up arguments, right? How do you kind of do this stuff? And I could never just put the words to it the way that she did. So anyways, hats off. So what do we do with this polling? I mean, the polling's not great, right? Polling doesn't look great. And then you've got these kind of reports, like Axios had a piece on this, right? And so from the Biden perspective, I'll just read some. Biden's polling denial, why he doesn't believe he's behind, right? So I'm just going to read you a little bit from this Axios piece. So President Biden doesn't believe his bad poll numbers, and neither do many of his closest advisors, according to people familiar with the matter. The dismissiveness of the poor polling is sincere, not public spin, according to Democrats who have spoken privately with the president and his team. That bedrock belief has informed Biden's largely steady-as-she-goes campaign, even as many Democrats outside the White House are agitating for the campaign to change direction, given that Biden is polling well behind where he was 4 years ago. The public polling simply doesn't reflect the president's support, they say. In public and private, Biden has been telling anyone who will listen that he's gaining ground and is probably up on Donald Trump in their rematch from 2020. Quote, while the press doesn't write about it, the momentum is clearly in our favor, with polls moving toward us and away from Trump, Biden told donors during a West Coast swing last week. A few days earlier, confronted with some of his bad polling numbers in a rare interview on CNN, Biden offered a more sweeping indictment of the polling methodology. Quote, the polling data has been wrong all along. How many, you guys do a poll at CNN, how many folks do you have to call to get one response? Right? Now, some national polls have shown Biden as ahead or tied with Trump, but in several other polls, the president is within the survey's margin of error. That's given Democrat and Republicans alike ammunition to claim they have momentum. They cite different polls and blah, blah, blah. So, what's the question here? Are they right? And look, there's no way to know. And I had a back and forth with someone the other day about this. We were just talking about this claim about, the polls are wrong, or the polls, they're off and all that stuff. And look, we have ample evidence to support that, right? We have ample evidence to support that. But it doesn't mean that the polls are biased in one way or another. Right? It doesn't mean that it's just not showing Democratic support, or it's just not showing Republican support, what it means is that the polling structure is not what it used to be for a whole bunch of different factors. And so the fact is we don't know, so we have to kind of go on it. So, but if we don't know, then that might be cause for concern. That's all I'm saying. I mean, if you look at the latest, these are this is in 538, like their latest compilation of this, right? The YouGov poll, right? YouGov poll has Trump up +1, 42 to 41 on Biden. The Ipsos poll from Reuters has him tied 40%, 40%. Ipsos poll from Reuters a little bit before 46 to 46 is Biden and Trump, right? At the very least, what we're seeing, right, and I could go through a whole bunch more here, but I'm not gonna. But some of them are tied, or they're 1 point Trump, 3 points Trump, tied. 2 points Biden. They're kind of like moving all over the map. The message is, right, that if anything, is like steady as she goes. No, we need to have like active campaigning, right? And we have to have like a sense of what you're for. I don't know. And I was listening. I mean, MSNBC is like has just so frustrated the hell out of me. It just, I've been trying to guide, because look, there's a value. The way I look at it is like this. There's a value in kind of hearing what is being said on there, because it gives you a sense of how what's the official kind of Democratic Party line on stuff, right? And if you measure that in part by the amount of coverage that it gives to particular things as opposed to others, well, the entire coverage on MSNBC is about Trump's trial, right? Sometimes you get like some stories tucked at the end that are more interesting. I still think Rachel Maddow does the best job on that network. She's only on once a week, and she generally does a little bit more deep dive in things. But it tells you a lot. They think that's all about this trial, and is that the only messaging that the Democrats have going forward? I sure as hell hope not. And and I look at, I've said this before in different ways, but I look at what happened here in the Penridge School District, the Central Bucks School District, and the amount of kind of people, community members that kind of got involved to kind of strip away the leadership of those school boards from these kind of far right Moms for Liberty backed folks, actually, and kind of like, and flip those school boards, and that organizing has not gone away. And many of those folks that have been organizing for those school board elections are now also like organizing for Ashley Ehas, right? Against Brian Fitzpatrick. They're organizing for Biden. They're going to be out there knocking on doors, and that's good, right? But that actually happened largely outside of the Democratic Party structure, right? I mean, that happened by community members that were motivated by a specific issue that was directly impacting their kids, my kids, our kids. And, and again, I've said this for a while now that, part of what we're looking at here with the climate crisis, that's probably I think probably got to be one of my number one issues at this point. Because, I mean, that's the game, right? So here, this is this recently reported in the what's this, last week? In The Guardian, right? World's top climate scientists expect global heating to blast past 1.5 degrees Celsius target, right? The planet is headed for at least 2.5 degrees Celsius of heating, with disastrous results for humanity, the poll of hundreds of scientists find. So let me just read you a little bit of this. Hundreds of the world's leading climate scientists expect global temperatures to rise at least 2.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels this century, blasting past internationally agreed targets and causing catastrophic consequences for humanity and the planet, an exclusive Guardian survey has revealed. Almost 80% of the respondents, all from the authoritative Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, foresee at least 2.5 degrees Celsius of global heating, while almost half anticipate at least 3 degrees Celsius. Only 6% thought the internationally agreed 1.5 degrees Celsius limit would be met. Many of the scientists envisage a, quote, semi-dystopian, unquote, future with famines, conflicts, and mass migrations driven by heat waves, wildfires, floods, storms of an intensity and frequency far beyond those that have already struck. Numerous experts have said that they have left feeling hopeless, infuriated, and scared by the failure of governments to act despite the clear scientific evidence provided. Quote, I think we are headed for major societal disruption within the next 5 years, unquote, said Greta Peckel of the University of Tasmania. Quote, authorities will be overwhelmed by the extreme event after extreme event. Food production will be disrupted. I could not feel greater despair over the future, unquote. But many said the climate fight must continue, however high the global temperature rose, because every fraction of a degree avoided would increase human suffering. Peter Cox of the University of Exeter, UK, said, quote, climate change will not suddenly become dangerous at 1.5 degrees Celsius. It already is. And it will not be game over if we pass 2 degrees Celsius, which we might well do. Right? That goes on. So that, excuse me. So that goes it. So what does that mean? It means that we need to start acting like we need it, right? That we have to act in order to kind of like push this stuff back. What is the vision of that? How do we get there? And this kind of incrementalism of the Democratic Party is certainly not going to do it. Right, so if you look at what just happened in Houston, right? I don't know if people saw this, right? These huge second round of like major storms that have gone through Texas is going to continue throughout the South. Hurricane force winds of a regular thunderstorm blew out the glass of high-rise buildings. Now downtown Houston's got glass all over the place. Knocked over buildings, power lines, everything. Over 1 million people are going to be without power for several days. And another storm is going to be approaching. These are just the regular storms. And again, I'm not saying that nothing's being done. I mean, look, there's like much more being done now than there ever has been. But as we kind of move forward, I mean, people are going to need to know about those things if you expect them to vote for you. And look, I mean, God's forbid that Donald Trump get elected again. And that he makes good on his promise. I mean, people saw this too as well. He basically told, he basically said to the, big fundraiser, private gathering, told folks in the fossil fuel industry, you should be dumping $1 billion to get me elected, he told them all. Right? And when he said, you get there, day one, gone. We'll get rid of all those climate legislation that Biden just passed. So if we think that the Inflation Reduction Act, the climate portions of that bill, the biggest bill legislation that's ever been passed in U.S. history, if we think that was insufficient, well, do the math. What happens if Trump comes in and then kind of gets rid of all those things? Then that's all gone. Then we got nothing. So there we go. But there is hope. There's hope. One thing I do, one source of this hope may be the kind of more militancy we're getting from labor unions, right? We saw that with the UAW. That's around the talk. We just saw a major union victory, right? The Volkswagen plant, right? One that 3 times it took. 3 times it took to kind of I'm sorry. I guess I'm not as good at that. There was new attention being paid. There was a great show, by the way, yesterday on the Majority Report, or 2 days ago, I'm sorry, the Majority Report, that had Mindy Iser on, talking about labor organizing in the South, right? Talked about the UAW victories, the fights at the Mercedes plant and at the Hyundai plant in Tennessee, and all this kind of going on. But this is one that I thought this was amazing, and I hadn't heard about this, right, until Hamilton Nolan kind of published this in these times. It's a piece called "Union Power Can Change Campus Protests Forever." So, it starts off with kind of talking about the encampments in college campuses, right? Of the Gaza protests, right? Protests wanting to kind of call for a permanent ceasefire, right? That kind of stuff. But as he says, but protests, for all their righteous fury and necessity, lack the legal ability to shut things down until change is achieved, right? So again, not knocking that, right? But recognizing there's a limitation to those protests, right? Either protest can be able to kind of has to have some sort of oomph, right? Other than just say outrage. We got to then say, well, how does it do? And it lacks that. Strikers, on the other hand, can truly make demands. Their proposition is simple. No work will get done until change is made. Obstinate institutions can resist protests and call out the police to disperse them, but that resistance is less effective against strikes for the simple reason that the strikers are also the workers who make the very same institution run. This intrinsic power of strikes is the reason why they are so strictly regulated, while the entire categories of strikes have been deemed illegal ever since the Taft-Hartley Act passed in 1947. It could also be why it is also wise when we challenge power to ask ourselves, could this protest also be a strike? I'm sorry for the reading here, but this is really good. The wave of protest against the war on Gaza has swept America's college campuses in recent weeks in an inspiring example of young people refusing to acquiesce to an atrocity that many of their elders have already rationalized away. The protests have succeeded in forcing institutions of all types to take a side on an issue that many would have preferred to pretend does not involve them. Many college presidents, torn between demands of wealthy conservative donors and the irksome desire to live up to their own hollow declarations of progressive values, have exposed themselves as both pathetic and hysterical. Riot police have proven to be a more favored method of control than reasoned discussion. The images of militarized cops descending on kids in tents who are asking to stop a genocide have made the protesters' point as effectively as anything they could have hoped for. Now, here we go. Universities are hoping to wipe out a budding movement with a combination of police and time. They are, I'm quite sure, hoping that the protesters do not start thinking deeply about the fact that colleges and universities have been the site of the largest union organizing campaigns in this country over the past several years. Higher education is in the midst of the most sweeping union wave of any industry in America. Unions of tenured professors, adjunct professors, grad student workers, and other campus employees organized in the tens of thousands to fill the same campuses that protest encampments do. Many of the people who have joined their encampments have been arrested therein are union members. The universe has teed up a beautiful opportunity to demonstrate the way that organized labor power can be used to accomplish broader political goals. This week, the eyes of the union world were focused on the United Auto Workers vote at the Mercedes plant in Alabama, where the union is prepared to secure a landmark win in the hostile South. But there is another UAW vote this week that is exciting for its own reasons. The strike authorization vote of UAW Local 4811, which represents about 48,000 academic workers in the University of California system. That vote will be the most substantial act so far of a union formally inserting itself into the heart of the Gaza protests in a way that schools fear the most. America's employer-friendly labor laws strictly box in where and when most unions are allowed to legally strike. For the most part, union contracts include no strike clauses that restrict striking for the life of the contract. An exception, though, is that employees can strike to protest unfair labor practices, including things that employer does that put the health and safety of the union members at risk. Can you think of anything that universities have done recently to put the health and safety of their campus employees at risk, such as professors and graduate student workers? Yeah? Yes, calling in the damn riot police on peaceful encampments, the very same high-handed exercise of violent power that schools have used to try to silence protests have opened the door for a strike, and even more formidable action than encampments themselves. The union's leaders recognize that these actions from school administrators were not just objectionable, they were contract violations. Specifically, the union says that the school's police interventions and subsequent retaliation against protesting union members violate those members' legally protected rights to engage in concerted activity to demand change in their own working conditions. They also say that the school's reactionary changes to campus speech policies, without giving the union a chance to bargain over them, are unfair labor practices as well. Quote, these ULPs, the unfair labor practices, cut to the core of what it means to be a union. Tanzil Chowhurdy, the executive board member, Chowhurdy said, quote, if workers don't feel safe in their workplace, if they feel the camps can unilaterally change all of its policies, or the campus can unilaterally change all of its policies, can we really even have a union that could stand up for anything we care about? Right? They are planning on modeling these potential strikes based upon this stand-up strikes, or the stand-up strikes the UAW used against the big three automakers this year, where instead of just striking the entire campus at once, would choose a campus. We'll start here. Oh, what? Still not work? Okay, we'll go here. Still not work? Okay, we're going to do this next one. Right? This was some of the best news in kind of union work that I've seen in a while. right? Where the union was actually, and again, you see this happen again and again, when you have a newly organized sectors of a union who are not kind of like, does not have union bureaucracy drilled into their brains, right? Where you're always supposed to defer to the leadership because the leadership knows best. No. Because these are recently organized campuses who have been intent on organizing, right? And are intent on they're committed to a union, not just because it gives them a good paycheck, right? But it is a vehicle to have an influence, legal influence, to bargain over the conditions of your life, working conditions at least. And saying to the boss that okay, please, boss, don't do that thing. Please, we really hope, are you a good boss? Are you going to help us? Are you going to be a good boss? Right? That's what most workers are forced to do, right? Hope that they have a decent boss. Hope that they're a good guy, right? But unions basically say, you're going to do the right thing because we have a contract. And if you are not willing to talk with us over the conditions of this and come to an agreement on this, we're walking. Now, the stuff that you want does not get done. Because we believe in this institution. And that's what you see again and again and again, these higher ed unions, right? We believe in education. We believe in teaching. We believe in this stuff. And in order to believe in it, you actually have to have workers that are not treated like garbage. As the kind of like cliche saying goes, teachers' teaching conditions are students' learning conditions. And if you care about the mission of higher education, in this case, you have a union that is going to try to be a defender of the conditions that make that higher education possible. So where a management is interested in beautification and kind of nice, pretty buildings and kind of like PR initiatives, right? All that other kind of stuff. The teachers who have unions have the ability to have an influence over the teaching conditions. What education is supposed to be about. Now, most old school unions, higher ed unions included, right, have fallen into this sense of like, well, there's only so much that we can do. And not trying to really push the envelope and kind of advocate affirmatively for things that matter in the world. But here you've got it. I mean, this is an amazing moment. So we'll see what happens. We're going to follow what goes on with this. I mean, this is not only going to challenge, this is interesting too as well, because it's not, I mean, look, Biden has been one of the most pro-union presidents that we've seen in memory, right? And the changes that have happened in the National Labor Relations Board, right? To actually kind of agree to, for example, oh yeah, we're going to enforce things not just on the employer side. Like we're not just going to like listen to the employer, but we're actually going to help workers too as well. Like there's, the worker side, workers' rights side of the National Labor Relations Act. Okay, we're going to take that. We're going to enforce those things too as well, which is why Starbucks is finally sitting there and kind of negotiating with its workers. Right? So here, this is going to be another test of the Biden administration and that National Labor Relations Board. And it's running headfirst into a whole bunch of problems that Biden's having politically, but that's another thing. So we'll keep an eye on these, on these workers, these academic workers at the University of California system, and see if this spreads elsewhere. Okay. All right, folks. I got to get going. I just realized that I've got to be someplace in about 5 minutes. So I got to get out of here. Sorry for that quick thing. Like I just got remembered of that. So get out of here. Everybody, good to talk to you this week. Sorry for the craziness. Talk to you soon. See ya.
There are no people in the future. Let me try my people. Come.